Good morning, honorable members and those under the sound of my voice. Psalms chapter 46, verses 1 to 3 says, God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in the time of trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. In our Moments of Impact devotional segment, I'll be sharing a devotional today entitled, God is with us. Over the past several weeks, our nation has been rocked by a surge of heinous crimes that has left many of our residents and citizens gripped by fear and wondering, where is the God of the Bahamas? I can go on record to say that every righteous Bahamian is tired of hearing about these heinous crimes, want our country to return to some semblance of normalcy. The general populace of our country have concluded that crime is not a governmental problem, but a national problem and requires all stakeholders to get involved and to do their part. Despite all that is going on in our country, come by today to declare over our nation that God is with us. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21 says, there is death and life in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. And so I came today to speak hope to the hearts of every Bahamian, and declare the criminals will not destroy our nation. The criminals will not steal our joy. The criminals will not make us prisoners in our nation. What we are experiencing in our nation at this time will only last for a season. This too shall pass. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 says, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heavens. I conclude today by releasing a prophetic word to our nation, which is found in Isaiah chapter 41 verse 10. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will uphold thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. To our great nation, I declare that God is with us. I declare that God will strengthen us. I declare that God will help us. I declare that God will sustain us. I declare that God will undergird us. And last but not least, I declare that God will give us the victory. I leave you today with the lyrics of an old song written by Mistress Sevilla D. Martin titled, God will take care of you. Be not dismayed, but ere betide, God will take care of you. Beneath his wings of love abide, God will take care of you. Through days of toil, when heart doth fail, God will take care of you. When dangers fares your path assail, God will take care of you. All you may need, he will provide. God will take care of you. Nothing you ask will be denied. God will take care of you. No matter what may be the test, God will take care of you. Lean, weary one, upon his breast. God will take care of you. Bahamas, God is with us. And because God is with us, he will take care of us. Selah. Think and act on these things. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we praise and exalt your name. We thank you for the gift of life that you graciously bestowed upon us. We lift up our nation today and thank you for your comforting words that we must not fear because you are with us. We thank you for your words that we ought not to be dismayed. We thank you today, Almighty God, for being our God. We thank you in advance for your promise that you will strengthen us and that you will help us and that you will uphold us with your right hand of righteousness. Oh Lord, we are nothing without you. And as a nation, we put our faith and our hope in you, for we walk by faith and not by sight. Thank you, Almighty God, for your covering. Thank you for your protection over our nation. We submit our wills to yours. Take full control of our nation and be lifted on high. Now, Father, we bring our political leaders to you. And I beseech you on their behalf today and ask you to lead, guide, and direct them as they carry out their responsibilities. Almighty God, grant them strength, strategies, and wisdom as they seek to conduct the people's business. We ask all these things in no other name but in the name of Jesus the Christ, the Son of the living God. Let us pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. And we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. Before we begin the people's business, I'd like to table the 2021 report by the Office of the Auditor General for the year ending June 30th, 2021. Order that the document do now lie on the table. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Good morning, Madam Speaker.
Good morning, honorable member.
With the concurrence of the opposition, we'd seek your leave to revert in the order of business to communications.
Thank you, honorable member.
For Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador will be presenting a communication, after which, on discussions, unusually, we would consent to the member for Marco City having a say.
Thank you, honorable member. Honorable member
Madam Speaker, opposition confirms that that has been agreed.
Thank you, honorable members. We will now revert back in the order of business, and the chair will now recognize the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
We wish to revert to laying of documents. So we wish to revert to laying of documents, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Thank you for the corrections. We will now revert back to laying of documents by ministers, and the chair will now recognize the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Public Debt Management, Bahamas Stock Number 2, 2024, 2023.
Thank you, honorable member. Order the document be brought up.
Madam Speaker,
continue, honorable member.
I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the Public Debt Management, Bahamas Registered Stock 2026, 2028, 2030, and 2033, Directions 2023.
Thank you, honorable member. Order the document be brought up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further laying of documents?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following Rehabilitation of Offenders, Expunging of Records, Offences Order 2022, appointed day notice 2020.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table.
Yeah, I have it.
Thank you. Further laying of documents?
The laying of documents.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Statement of communication by ministers? The chair will now recognize the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Madam Speaker, for far too long, the persistent cycle of violence and crime has been a dark cloud over our nation. Each act of violence is a stark reminder of the urgent work that lies ahead. The stories of families shattered, dreams unfulfilled, and communities living in fear are not just news items. They are heartbreaking realities that I, as your Prime Minister, carry with me every day. These are not just statistics. They are our children, our friends, and our future. Today, I'm tabling our government strategy called Crackdown 2024, Building Safer Communities. I'll lay it at the end of the communication, Madam Speaker. My government's plan addresses on the harsh realities we face. It is bold and unflinching. It is grounded in the certain knowledge that the security of our citizens is our #1 responsibility. We recognize that the roots of criminality are deep and tangled. They stem from social, economic, and cultural factors. Our response, therefore, is likewise multifaceted and robust, addressing each of these aspects with the seriousness they deserve. Madam Speaker, the 5 pillars strategy, prevention, policing, prosecution, punishment, and rehabilitation, forms the backbone of our approach. It covers the full cycle of criminal behavior. To truly combat crime, we must not only enforce the law, but also address the underlying causes that lead individuals down the path of criminality. In line with our commitment to strengthen the rule of law and to ensure justice, today I'm also announcing a significant amendment to the Bail Act. The bail is a constitutional right, but not a right to be abused. There is a fundamental right to be presumed innocent. But the liberty that accompanies that presumption is not absolute, especially when someone poses a danger to society and a danger to themselves. Our amendment will ensure that bail is automatically revoked for those accused persons who commit offenses while on bail. This includes those found to be in violation of the terms of their bail, an offense under the amendment. This measure sends a clear message. Our legal system will no longer tolerate those who flout its rules and endanger our communities. Overall, our comprehensive plan is at the heart of a bold determination by my government to combat the scourge of crime which has long plagued our society. We are expanding school policing, placing more trained officers in schools to foster positive relationships with students. This initiative aims not only to ensure safety, but also to engage in prevention, detection, and intervention of criminal activities among our young people. Our clear, whole, and build strategy is a robust approach to dismantling gang presence in our neighborhoods. This phased strategy is focused on rooting out gang elements, securing these areas, and then investing in community development to prevent the reemergence of such elements. To deter crime in high-risk areas, we are significantly increasing police presence through expanded saturation patrols. This heightened visibility of law enforcement is a direct response to the community's call for increased security. In our technological front, we are introducing advanced facial recognition CCTV systems. These state-of-the-art surveillance tools will greatly enhance our crime detection and prevention capabilities. Recognizing that crime is not just a local issue, we are also strengthening regional cooperation in our fight against drug trafficking and illegal arms trade. By working closely with our neighboring countries, we aim to tackle these cross-border issues more effectively. Community policing is another crucial aspect of our strategy. By building strong community ties, we aim to improve relationships and aid intelligence gathering. This approach is pivotal in understanding and addressing the unique challenges faced by different communities. We are also investing in communication centers, enhancing witness support, and utilizing unexplained wealth orders to target the financial underpinnings of criminal activities. Each of these initiatives is designed to disrupt the various facets of criminal operations. Furthermore, our focus on bolstering the confidential informant fund and constructing a national forensic laboratory will enhance our investigative capabilities. In addressing gang involvement and illegal firearms possession, we are evaluating and strengthening our legal framework to ensure that penalties are sufficiently stringent to act as effective deterrents. By enhancing our strategy against crime, we are building upon a series of robust measures already in place. These include significant recruitment efforts to bolster our police force, the implementation of targeted saturation patrols, and the acquisition of advanced resources to aid our law enforcement officers. Furthermore, we have established specialized units, notably the anti-gang and gun unit and the domestic violence unit, to tackle specific aspects of crime that pose a serious threat to our society. This approach is a strategic advancement and leverages the progress we have already made. We are fully determined to meet the challenges that lie ahead. Madam Speaker, while we make every effort to unite Bahamians in a whole of government and whole of society assault on crime, I feel obliged to bring to the House a recent incident which reflected extremely poorly on the judgment of one of our honorable members. Madam Speaker, as was widely broadcast in the media, the leader of the opposition, Her Majesty's loyal opposition, accused the Commissioner of the Royal Bahamas Police Force of being, and I quote, a liar. Madam Speaker, I'm sure that I'm not alone to describe to the House the shock and embarrassment I felt here, an honorable attack the police in such terms. What made the attack even more egregious was the fact that it stemmed from the fact the honorable gentleman was merely ignorant of the details concerning a police investigation, an investigation in which the honorable member may likely be a person of interest, given the public utterances of the complainant. Madam Speaker, calling someone a liar is not language permitted in this House because it is an affront to the implied integrity of everyone here. The same is true of other constitutionally recognized positions. Such an attack ought to be beneath the dignity of honorable members. Yes. One would also think that the honorable gentleman would show more prudence as in making such an accusation in the media. He also exposes himself to a prosecution, himself to a prosecution for criminal libel. At a time when we are urging behaviors to join together in the fight against crime and to support the police on the front line of the battle, the honorable gentleman chooses to undermine the integrity of the person at the front of the battle. How ironic. It beggars belief. While the Commissioner has rightly maintained a dignified silence on the matter, it is therefore left to us to cry shame on his behalf. The Commissioner has dedicated a lifetime of service to this country. He has achieved office through dedicated excellence. He has sacrificed much and has himself been the victim of crime when he was shot, almost killed, and injured by a culprit. He has weathered with dignity and grace many storms in the past, several under the previous administration. It should go without saying that each of us ought to be part of the effort to support the work of the brave men and women of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Every day, they are the ones who put themselves in potentially life-threatening danger on our behalf. If we have questions or challenges for them, each of us is privileged enough to be able to pick up the phone and call. I have every confidence that a courteous and truthful response would be forthcoming if you call. Madam Speaker, the Commissioner deserves better. The ladies and gentlemen who serve in the Royal Bahamas Force and all our armed forces and services deserve better. I therefore invite the honourable gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, to do the decent thing and apologize to the Madam Speaker, in the wider fight against crime, in which all right-thinking Bahamians are engaged, the Leader of the Opposition also appears to straddle a line of contradiction. On the one hand, there are claims of not playing politics. Yet, on the other hand, there appears to be a concerted effort to lead a series of political protests. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have it both ways. Apart from the futility of these knee-jerk reactions, and the workload of an already heavily stretched police force by holding protests. What message will criminals receive when they see such grossly irresponsible grandstanding? Why should they take seriously our efforts to join everyone in a whole of society fight against crime? And the Leader of the Opposition and all who may doubt our commitment should take heed. This is not a time for political gamemanship. Our nation is at a critical juncture. This moment demands of us a unity of purpose and action. I will not rest, but my government rest to turn the tide of violence. This is our pledge to every citizen who looks to us for protection and peace. Madam Speaker, the window is swiftly closing. Those who choose terror and violence. We are already intensifying our efforts to ensure that houses, cars, and civil place of refuge are no longer safe for criminal behavior. And to those harboring these agents of chaos and destruction, be warned. You too will find yourselves on the wrong side of the law. We stand united as one Bahamas against the forces that seek to undermine our peace and prosperity. While the government, police, and judicial system bear a significant responsibility in this fight against crime, so too does each and every parent, guardian, sibling, friend, and neighbor. We are all the protectors of our nation's children and future. When you see something, say something. Speaking up is not snitching. It may well be what saves your life or the lives of your children. I shudder to think how many lives, innocent lives, we might have saved had someone spoken up, sought help, or intervened sooner. True and lasting progress requires the active participation of every citizen who yearns for a safer Bahamas. We need individuals and communities to step up, to become part of the transformative change we are striving for. This is not about assigning blame or delivering lectures. It's about envisioning and building the kind of communities and country we all want to live in. This is the only country we have, and we will do whatever is necessary to protect it. This is a fight that we must win, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Madam Speaker, now lay the whole of government and whole of society approach to crime.
Member Chu.
Lay on the table. And copies are therefore handing out. Delayed your communication as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Honourable. What are the documents do line the table? Further statement and communication by ministers.
By Minister?
Sorry, Madam Speaker. I'm interested in responding to the Prime Minister in keeping with what was agreed with the leader of
Honourable Member, I know it's procedure to hear from the ministers first and then to hear the response, but if Mr. would be able to lean the rule.
Timing, and if he pleases to do it now, it pleases you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The chair will now recognize the Honourable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And just to again put in context, the Minister with responsibility for national security and the leader of government business in the House indicated that the government side would be prepared for me to respond to the Prime Minister's speech, in part because there may be elements of it that would be controversial. And I agreed within that context that I'd be more than happy. I would also just say to the public that I did in fact write the Speaker, and the House did appropriately respond to indicate that my remarks would have to be submitted according to the rules in advance in order to be read. So, Madam Speaker, these remarks that I would have read with respect to a matter of national importance, which is crime, had the remarks that the Prime Minister made not been made, these would have been the remarks. In light of what he has had to say, I will continue to speak on this matter of national importance, which is crime, but also to respond to the Prime Minister's attempt, Madam Speaker, to once again deflect from the very issue that we are here to talk about, which is crime in general, but violent crimes in particular, and the fact, Madam Speaker, that today 24th of January, we have recorded, Madam Speaker, 17 homicides. Madam Speaker, we are dangerously approaching the record of 22 homicides in 1 month, which occurred under the previous Progressive Liberal Party administration. Madam Speaker, I agree with the Prime Minister and member for Cat Island. These are not merely statistics. These are our children, our relatives. This morning, I had occasion to speak on the radio to make mention of the fact that many of us in here share in common the occasional fear of crime, as well as knowing persons or we ourselves having been victimized by crime, but a lot of our friends, relatives, Madam Speaker, have been victimized by crime. And I'm sympathetic to every member of this House who have faced, Madam Speaker, direct attacks on their property, on their person, or their loved ones. My heart goes out to Bahamians who are listening to all of us, Madam Speaker, this morning, who are grieving for relatives who have lost their lives, and were it not for the talented health professionals in the Bahamas, many more would have been a part of that statistic. But they're maimed, they're traumatized mentally, emotionally, Madam Speaker. And we were elected, Madam Speaker, to address the fear of crime, Madam Speaker, and the occurrence of crime. The public certainly is aware that crime is often a condition of the heart. It often emerges out of the social decay that we are experiencing, Madam Speaker, as a country. But what they are also aware of, Madam Speaker, is that in our campaigns, in our reason for existing as political organizations and government, is to provide peace and safety for residents. So while we may not have committed, Madam Speaker, to crime or been the genesis of the emergence of crime, we are expected to lead the charge to address it, Madam Speaker. And so today, the opposition restates the commitment we have made before, that we will work with all stakeholders in a productive, constructive way to help coordinate a strategy for short, medium, and long term to address the issue of crime, to ensure that we put in place preventative measures so that our children are not groomed by others who would misuse them in the execution of their criminal enterprises. We are committed. Madam Speaker, we are committed to providing advice and standing in partnership with law enforcement agencies, inclusive of the police and the Commissioner, Madam Speaker, in recommending strategies for effective policing and to be ready to be supportive of our law enforcement. We've done it before, Madam Speaker, and we'll do it. We support, Madam Speaker, effective prosecution so that those persons who have not responded to preventative measures or solid programs will be dealt with by the full force of the law. And Madam Speaker, that the penalties, the sentencing, should be commensurate or consistent with the crimes that are committed. Madam Speaker, we have presented recommendations to this administration. We believe, Madam Speaker, that many of those who go to prison will come out. Therefore, rehabilitation is important, Madam Speaker. March 27 of 2022, the Deputy Leader and I presented to the government, we were invited, Madam Speaker, to a press briefing by the public relations arm of the government, to a press briefing on gang violence and that contribution to the overall crime figures. We attended that meeting, Madam Speaker, and I will read into the record some of the recommendations that were presented to the government, Madam Speaker, not in a press conference, not in a protest, but sitting at the police headquarters. We presented recommendations, Madam Speaker. Others were quite happy with us because we appeared to be engaging, conciliatory. But the moment we spoke up, Madam Speaker, because we believe that the job that the government was hired to execute was not being effectively executed, Madam Speaker, the position has then changed, and the characterizations, Madam Speaker, of this administration, this opposition, of this leader, has also changed, Madam Speaker. But we have a job to do, much like the government has a job to provide comprehensive strategies for peace and safety in our communities. We have a job to work with the government and all other stakeholders in doing the same, even if that job includes critiquing what is done or fail to be done, Madam Speaker. And so let me read into your hearing, Madam Speaker, some of the recommendations we made on March 27, 2022. One of the recommendations we made, and it was addressed to the Prime Minister and to the member for Freetown, the Minister of National Security. One, under operational, we recommended to increase police presence in hotspot areas to either deter crimes or enable response in the event that a crime was committed, and not merely with, Madam Speaker, patrol cars that are recognizable, but also, Madam Speaker, with unmarked cars, Madam Speaker, so we are able to interdict persons even in advance of the commission of an offense. Secondly, we recommended to eliminate the habitats, Madam Speaker, where criminality flourishes. This includes, Madam Speaker, eliminating derelict vehicles, dilapidated houses, overgrown lots, and gathering spots for known criminal enterprises. Thirdly, that we deploy intelligence officers throughout the inner cities to proactively diffuse criminal activities and gather invaluable information. Fourthly, Madam Speaker, that we increase border protection and inspections, especially of pleasure crafts and private planes, being courteous, Madam Speaker, but nevertheless focused on ensuring that illegal weapons do not enter the Bahamas. 5, that we engage in with regional partners towards the involvement of undercover national security operatives to infiltrate and dismantle organized gangs in the Bahamas that collaborate with other jurisdictions. 6, this is the 27th of March 2022, we submitted these. Extend the Neighborhood Watch program to the city and over the hill communities. Local associations should be set up with community police participation and guidance. 7, to expand the capacity to utilize drones and to tie their deployment to the shot spotter system implemented by the FNM, thus improving the ability to follow and trace, Madam Speaker, traffic movements immediately after the system's alert that gunshots had been fired. And 8, increase and enhance monitoring of persons on bail to ensure that whichever vendor is contracted, that they have the capacity, Madam Speaker, to provide a reliable and consistent service. 9, to encourage police to introduce the element of surprise, Madam Speaker, and I've commented on that earlier. 10, to reintroduce police foot patrols in crime-ridden communities, Madam Speaker. Under administrative concerns, we commented at that time, Madam Speaker, that we should allocate and carefully manage resources required by the police and defense force officers so that they can outperform criminals they are presently competing with. And secondly, that the government and police senior command should work and professionally with the Police Staff Association in ensuring that the officers are not disadvantaged and to ensure that their morale is high. Madam Speaker, we talk about various sectors of government working in tandem with each other, and the Prime Minister in his national address alluded to this by making the point that he has asked his ministers to submit their recommendations on how they may contribute to the overall strategy of the government. Madam Speaker, that is encouraging, but it was worrisome at the time that I heard it in light of the fact that we are now almost 2 years in. That assignment, that directive should have been given, Madam Speaker, on the front end of this administration. Having said that, nevertheless, Madam Speaker, we recommended back in 2022, on the 27th of March, again, additional recommendations. Engage faith-based organizations and other social partners to empower their existing anti-crime initiative or work to help them introduce some. Madam Speaker, we have been meeting the leaders of all denominations and had an opportunity to present a comprehensive recommendation of a socially based but fully integrated program to members of the Christian Council whose membership present hails from different denominations. Madam Speaker, we have not just been talking about this, we've been on the front line seeking to engage members of the faith-based organization. Secondly, under intersectoral approach, provide counseling for family and friends of murdered and raped victims to address the anger, the shame, and desire to take revenge that many of them experience. Madam Speaker, in the aftermath of multiple homicides, myself, along with other members of our team, have visited families of murdered victims, Madam Speaker, and we have worked with the Christian Council to recommend counseling for those families and have helped to mobilize counseling help in a few of those instances, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we've also recommended training, Madam Speaker, sensitivity training, and so I was pleased to hear of sensitivity training as it relates to specific crimes and the need for law enforcement, again, to have sensitivity training when addressing them. We also recommended that we strategically select at least 2 or 3 promising individuals to go on commissioner's course so that there are persons who will understudy the commissioner and be given due consideration when he demits office in order to fulfill that position. Madam Speaker, we also recommended developing a zero tolerance for crime in the community and among law enforcement officers. We also recommended to reduce political interference in the day-to-day operation of law enforcement agencies so that the appearance, Madam Speaker, of law enforcement carrying out the directives of political figures does not become a prominent perception in the country as it has become, Madam Speaker, thereby, Madam Speaker, forcing residents in general, some of us, including myself on the side, to warn against the weaponization of the Royal Bahamas police force, Madam Speaker. We also recommended enhanced enforcement of laws, Madam Speaker. We recommended also new gang legislation, this again, Madam Speaker, the 27th of March, 2022, to discourage formation and membership of gangs. Review legislation from other countries that have had similar issues. We further recommended the establishment of an intersectoral, nonpartisan crime commission, one of the recommendations that have come out of previous stakeholder consultations more than a decade ago, Madam Speaker, that this group would have the autonomy to study all aspects of crime challenges we face and to make recommendations on actions required to address. We also recommended in the document presented in March of 2022 the establishment of consultative committees to be in each police station for a divisional policing plan with a cross-section of individuals, Madam Speaker. This would include a cross-section of members of the community who would be able to relay to the police what exactly are the policing needs of their particular community, because it varies, Madam Speaker, from community to community. We also recommended in 2022, work with the community-based partners to identify potential problems and existing feuds that may escalate into violent acts, and then intervene and resolve such feuds, violence interruption, Madam Speaker, and hire suitably qualified persons, Madam Speaker, who would lead this particular intervention effort. We also recommended to implement gun amnesty initiative and a reward system for information leading to securing firearms and ammunition, and to create a range of employment and skills training, socialization, and recreational programs that especially target 17 to 35-year-olds. Every inner city, Madam Speaker, every inner city community should have such an initiative that are properly funded and professionally administered. We further recommend, Speaker, that we create or we help in the enhancement of recreational spaces, parks, and community centers where persons of all ages, Madam Speaker, can be accommodated in a safe and healthy way for individual as well as group activities. Many of our communities, Madam Speaker, have one park dominated by one demographic. Before I recommended that we publish and distribute a directory of all youth organizations in the country so that every child and young adult, Madam Speaker, can see what is available for them to participate in, and parents can take advantage of getting their children engaged in productive activities. We further recommended an increased efforts to decrease the case backlog in courts and increase efforts to maintain maximum amounts of the court's functioning capacity to ensure timely trials. We also recommended to improve the corrections facilities, including increased rehabilitation programs, separation of first-time youth offenders from the general prison population, facilitating orderly reintegration into society for everyone who had served their time, and that we must work out a compensation system for some prison work carried out by inmates that will be of benefit not merely to them, but also, Madam Speakers, to victims of their crimes. We further recommend consideration must be given to the mandatory participation of all high school students in voluntary work at one of the country's established charitable non-governmental agencies, and that the government should solicit the support of the church and other established youth organizations such as Girls and Boys Brigade, Pathfinders, Scouts, and the numerous other cadet programs that exist as after-school activities for our high school children. Madam Speaker, we also believed it was necessary for the government to incentivize a big brother-type organizations, since the government cannot carry the load alone. Madam Speaker, we also at that time encouraged that service clubs such as Rotary and Rotaract, Kiwanis Youth and Zonta, and lodges and friendly societies should also develop mentorship programs targeting boys and girls in every primary and middle school throughout the country. Madam Speaker, that was March of 2022. And just recently, Madam Speaker, we made following recommendations. Madam Speaker, we recommended just recently to the government that we ought to be intentional about re-socializing our children, Madam Speaker. We are competing with messages, whether it's through songs, through music, through gangsters. We are competing with an alternate value system that they are pushing on our children. And so we recommended promoting values such as hard work and industry. 2, encouraging, providing an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. 3, helping young and old to develop the ability to delay gratification and manage appetite with self-control. 4, teach respecting others' personal property. Teach the perspective of life that we ought to protect person's body and personal space. We recommend, Madam Speaker, that we get busy grooming our citizens to value the country in which they live and developing a desire to contribute to making it better. Madam Speaker, we also recommend that we be intentional about teaching the value of education and the many benefits it produces beyond earning a salary and income. That we also teach conflict resolution without resorting to violence in words or actions. And finally, that we teach avoiding prejudices that lead to discriminations that cause harm to others, and that we nurture valuing God and in the affairs of men and women. Madam Speaker, we must be intentional about inculcating specific values in a generation that is importing values from the vilest of songs, the most hedonistic and individualistic of movies, and from cultures, Madam Speaker, that promotes the conflict that we are now facing as a country. Madam Speaker, we need cooperation, and the opposition has been prepared to cooperate with the government. That has not changed, Madam Speaker. I mentioned this morning, Madam Speaker, that I received a letter from the Commissioner of Police, Madam Speaker, which I would like to read into, Madam Speaker, your hearing. We are prepared to work with all stakeholders. It is, we believe, Madam Speaker, in the interests of our country. Far too many people are dying. Too many people are being maimed. Madam Speaker, people talk about us playing politics with the issue of crime. Madam Speaker, I've lost a nephew just recently who was murdered. I've lost brothers. A number of us have faced that. We were working on many issues before politics. As a 19-year-old at the College of the Bahamas, I was working on some recreation grounds calling for stiff penalties for offenders at 19. Madam Speaker, throughout my development, this is what we have been about. Today, we talk about, Madam Speaker, not just because that's in our DNA, which it is. We also speak about it, Madam Speaker, because that's our job. It is our job, Madam Speaker, to make recommendations about the future, to hold the government accountable, to believe they are not properly prioritizing scarce time and resources. Madam Speaker, was the member for Cat Island playing politics when he placed billboards throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Madam Speaker, highlighting, Madam Speaker, the amount of murders at that time? Madam Speaker, to this country was, should we hide the truth? What do we have to hide? His understanding during that time was that the public needed to know that there was an administration in place that was not doing all they can to reduce those horrific numbers that represented fathers, brothers, sons. Madam Speaker, we have not put up any billboards. What we have done is held press conferences, Madam Speaker, with multiple recommendations, making the best of our thoughts and our energies available to work with this administration. In the course of doing so, Madam Speaker, we have also said that every stakeholder must, as best as possible, be an honest broker when they come to the table to do their part in fighting the scourge of crime. That's true for the opposition. That's true for the government. That's true for the police. That's true for the faith-based organizations. All of us, Madam Speaker, must do our part. Madam Speaker, we are at a period where some of us, Madam Speaker, feel targeted. Some of us feel that the government has weaponized the police force. Nevertheless, Madam Speaker, we intend to meet with our commissioner, to work with our commissioner. But we are also prepared to say, Madam Speaker, we are also prepared to say, Madam Speaker, that there are citizens who go to the police station because they have been invited by officers, not as persons of interest, but they have been invited as persons who can help provide information in order to capture persons of interest. Only, Madam, to find themselves photographed going to the police station, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, after being photographed, to then have their images circulated nationally and internationally as persons of interest with no less than the seal of the police force. And not one statement, Madam Speaker, ever issued, Madam Speaker, by the police to disassociate itself with the scurrilous information being circulated. Not one time, not two times, not three times, but multiple times that has the images of opponents of the government. Madam Speaker, at a minimum, if they're not responsible, which we can't believe for circulating it, at a minimum, it could be castigated. And so, Madam Speaker, I was elected, we were elected to defend rights of citizens, no matter who is it that is, in our view, perpetrating any falsehood that impacts them. And we wouldn't retreat. We cannot be shamed into cowardice or to retreat. We will continue, Madam Speaker, to speak truth to power. And, Madam Speaker, whenever we discover if there's something amiss, something we misinterpreted, Madam Speaker, we will make amends. We are prepared to work with all stakeholders. We will not retreat, Madam Speaker, in standing up for the Bahamian people. And so, Madam Speaker, the Commissioner of Police has indicated his interest in us sitting and talking, address issues that are of concern to us, that are of concern to the police force, so that we can work in a more amicable way. Madam Speaker, we are committed to doing so. We are also committed to working with the Prime Minister and his team. But, Madam Speaker, in the absence of programs to do so, an invitation to engage, Madam Speaker, we are going to hold the government's feet to the fire. We are going to work with other stakeholders. Madam Speaker, we are going to go tonight on a community project to work with church-based organizations and members of the community addressing issues in one of those hotspot areas. We will be there, not in colors, but in person, Madam Speaker, to help stop the bloodshed. My mother lives in Yellow Elder. I'm concerned, Madam Speaker, about safety, but I'm concerned about every other person's safety in that community. And I give the commitment that we will work with all right-thinking Bahamians in addressing the scourge of crime without discrimination. And with those few words, Madam Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to share our views on the matter. One of the action by the Minister in seeking to shame or challenge the work that we are doing will cause us to deter from the path that we are on.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We will now revert back to the order of business. Statement and communications by ministers. The chair will now recognize the Honourable Member for Engliston.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to make it clear, I stand on behalf of the Bahamian people. And I rise to make this communication on the subject of our nation's premier art form, the quintessential creative expression of our people called Junkanoo. There is, in my view, Madam Speaker, nothing like it anywhere in the world. The music, the cowbells, the drums, the stunning and colors-filled costumes, the rhythms, and the unison created by all who can see or hear the creative burst, and the sizzling energy. I am most pleased and honored today to advise that on the 5th of December, 2023, in the city of Kasane in the Republic of Botswana, on the continent of Africa, the Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage, the ICH, a board of UNESCO, UNESCO being the United Nations agency responsible for education, science, and culture, acting on the recommendation of its evaluation body, acceded to the Bahamas' submission that Junkanoo should be inscribed on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage. Speaker, there was formal recognition of the import of Junkanoo to world cultural heritage, and Junkanoo was raised up to the world as an invaluable cultural heritage. This historic and national outcome was the product of a process that began with a fact-finding in 2019 at the 14th ICH meeting in Colombia, and the subsequent formation of a 10-member committee to oversee the process. The 10-member committee, and I must speak their names in this House, comprised Dion Miller, the Junkanoo Corporation of New Providence, JCNP, Andrew Edwards, JCNP, Dr. Dwight Marshall, National Junkanoo Committee, NJC, Kishlane Smith, NJC, Percival Francis, representing the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture, and the leader of the Saxons, Henry Higgins, representing the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture, and leader of Conquerors for Christ, Nicole Sutherland King, lecturer on the board of Genesis Junkanoo Group, Arlene Nash Ferguson, cultural icon, Educulture, affiliated with Conquerors for Christ prior to being in one family, Rushard Martin, attorney, affiliated with Roots. The work of this committee culminated in a final submission on March 31st, 2022. The submission was a highly technical document which was required to meet a complex series of objective criteria. A video was prepared to accompany the file, and Mr. Utah Taylor Roll, followed by Mr. Robert Johnson, assisted in that effort. 10 photos were also a requirement to be submitted with the file, and these were selected from a compilation of photos in the Division of Cultural Affairs Archive. The nomination was supported by 10 letters of support which accompanied the file from the JCNP, the NJC, Saxons, One Family, Valley Boys, Roots, Genesis, and Conquerors for Christ, Educulture, and the Platinum Grand Bahama. It was an almost 2-year process before a decision was made. Our file, the Bahamas, went through the various stages of evaluation by the evaluation body, commencing in June of 2022, and finally examined, as I've said, on December 5th, 2023 in Kasane, Botswana. The ICH committee adopted the recommendation to inscribe Junkanoo on the representative list of humanity, the ICH, as our file satisfied all 5 of the criteria necessary. Out of the 145 countries with items inscribed on the ICH list, only 4 are in the Caribbean, and the Bahamas is one. I wish to put on record the decision in part of the 24-member Intergovernmental Committee as follows, and I'm quoting the decision that was made and reiterated in that event. The committee takes note that the Bahamas have nominated Junkanoo for inscription on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Junkanoo is the national cultural festival of the Bahamas. Dating back to the beginning of the 19th century, it was brought to the Bahamas by enslaved Africans who used their 3-day holiday to recreate festivals from home, an outlet for creative expression. Today, Junkanoo is mainly celebrated through parades that retain many African elements and are a grand spectacle of indigenous music, performances, storytelling, and craftsmanship. This is the adjudication of UNESCO. Junkanoo is a celebration of unity, bringing together thousands of people of all ages and backgrounds in the creation of towering, colorful costumes with cardboard and crepe paper. The costumes are prepared in shacks, where the practitioners display their craft and transmit their knowledge to younger generations. The knowledge and skills related to the performance and the creation of costumes are also transmitted within families. The entire community plays a part in preparing youth for their rites of passage into Junkanoo. Junkanoo is incorporated into every major national event as a celebration, as entertainment, and as a traditional cultural expression. It fosters a sense of community pride, identity, companionship, spirituality, and unity. Junkanoo is a celebration of creativity that refines the art of making beauty out of junk. The committee considers that from the information included in the file, the nomination satisfies the following criteria for inscription on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. 1, the element is one of the foremost national cultural celebrations in the Bahamas and is an outlet for community expression in the form of a parade, a celebration of resilience and creativity. The element includes indigenous music, performance, storytelling, artistry, and craftsmanship. Its preparation takes place over the course of the year and includes costume designers, craftspeople, performers, artisans, marshals, administrators, timekeepers, judges, supervisors, invigilators, and finance committees. Transmission takes place in spaces called shacks, where older community members pass on their skills to younger generations through rites of passage. Families also play an important role in the transmission of the element, as do schools, such as through the Junior Junkanoo program. 2, inscription would bring visibility to the regional diversity of Junkanoo. Cultural offices will be opened, heightening visibility and awareness of Junkanoo and of intangible cultural heritage in general. Living heritage will be promoted as a way of developing the local economy. Inscription would encourage the national government to promote visibility and awareness of intangible cultural heritage and of related workshops, seminars, meetings, and other cultural events. At the international level, inscription would also promote living heritage in general and increase awareness of Junkanoo around the world. It would also result in job creation. Because Junkanoo is an integral part of the social and religious fabric of the Bahamas, inscription would also promote dialogue while instilling pride and fostering safeguarding efforts. It would help highlight different regional expressions of Junkanoo while acknowledging and valuing common traits. Additionally, inscription of Junkanoo would highlight this slavery expression of culture, empowering the African diaspora. It can also support sustainable development in the context of Target 8.9 of the Sustainable Development Goals on policies to promote sustainable development. 3, and this is why they're saying this meets the criteria. The element remains viable through its practice by Junkanoo groups across the islands. There are community-based shacks which serve as studios and informal Junkanoo training institutions. The Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture established a National Junkanoo Committee which advises the minister and is in charge of Junior Junkanoo. A secretariat on Junkanoo was created in 1992 and has organized expositions and summer programs, provided sponsorship, and coordinated research and documentation activities. Proposed safeguarding measures take into account threats such as the dilution of the craft and cultural appropriation, and that's a serious one. The measures entail supporting community-based Junkanoo initiatives, increasing the number of Junkanoo parades, funding academic research, and preserving traditional Junkanoo. The state party, which is the Bahamas, will provide funding and land grants and carry out legislative reforms. The Junkanoo Committee, which includes the state and community representatives, took part in the nomination process, ensuring that Junkanoo groups and communities throughout the Bahamas were informed and engaged in the process. And finally, the preparation of the file was accompanied by a cross-section of stakeholders such as the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, the National Junkanoo Committee, the Junkanoo Committee, New Providence, and Junkanoo participants at large. The committee actively sought the inputs and free, prior, and informed consent of the communities, groups, and individuals concerned. A large number of consent letters are attached to the nomination file. As a community-based activity, Junkanoo's customary practices are handed down from generation to generation. Individuals might perceive certain aspects of their practice as secret, but this does not impede the nomination of Junkanoo as intangible cultural heritage. However, it's important to note, Madam Speaker, that caution was expressed that because of previous occurrences elsewhere globally, UNESCO wanted state parties, including ours, to ensure that even with the evolution of cultural practices over time, some originality remains, and they warned over what was described as over-commercialization. In our speech, and I attended as the minister responsible for UNESCO, I expressed on behalf of the Bahamian people the following sentiments. And we extended warm greetings on behalf of the Governor General, Her Excellency Most Honorable Cynthia Pratt, and our Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis. And we told them, the Bahamas country is a small island developing state, an archipelago comprising hundreds of islands, keys, and rocks, emplaced like precious jewels across 100,000 square miles of sea. A nation of over 400,000 souls, most of whom trace their ancestral roots to the African continent, and whose forefathers and foremothers were transported to that place, this place, by way of the ocean of pain known as the Middle Passage. More than 2 centuries ago, the awakenings of the creative expression called Junkanoo was unleashed, and it has since survived and thrived through eras of dramatic social, political, and economic change, proving to be an authentic, resilient, and enduring cultural manifestation of a proud people. Whilst its rhythms fundamentally hearken to Mother Africa, its evolution has become a modern-day expression of the strength and rich character and triumphant spirit of the Bahamian people. It has undergone mutations, with, for example, at one point in history, Junkanoo being primarily a demonstration of defiance and protest, to a joyful celebration, a declaration of freedom, and a bold and contemporary commentary. Junkanoo is a complex art form, a rich fusion of brilliant colors, intricate craft work and design, towering pieces, rhythmic orchestral music of goatskin and cowskin drums, cowbells and brass instruments, choreographed dance. It is a merging cultural space, created in all walks of life, all ages, men and women, in goodly numbers. It attracts spectators in the thousands, and because of its infectious energy, incites the rocking participation and a pulsating oneness from the sidelines. As we say in the Bahamas, we feel it in our belly, and it resonates in our heart and soul. I sound like, I think, okay. But this is what I told them in Africa. It is an emblazoned component of our national identity and in our quest for self-realization, and it has been and remains one true constant. It is right and necessary that this cultural shared treasure should be safeguarded and preserved for the Bahamas and for the world. I express my profound gratitude, and I did to UNESCO and to the Junkanoo Committee, and I described the Junkanoo Committee's work as a labor of love, and the Junkanoo community who threw their full weight behind it. And I cannot end my brief, well, it wasn't that brief, but briefer than Marco City. I cannot end these brief remarks without thanking the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture for his support, and which was, and he was ably and fully represented on that trip by a senior officer, and his input and support has been manifested in this successful result. Junkanoo, Madam Speaker, is a beautiful and precious heritage of the Bahamian people, one to be respected, protected, and preserved. I am pleased to announce, as I end, that the Ministry of Education is now preparing the groundwork to cause for Junkanoo to be incorporated into the public school curriculum at primary and secondary levels so that every child will have the opportunity not only to learn the significance of the history of Junkanoo, but their own history, and will come to learn the innovative craft and musicology and rhythms of this incredible art form called Junkanoo. Madam Speaker, I close in reiterating that Junkanoo is now formally declared a world cultural, intangible heritage art form. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Table that. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. Order that the document to lie on the table. Lay your document. Order the document be brought up. Thank you. Order the document to lie on the table. Further statement and communication by ministers? No further statement. Thank you, Honorable Member. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentation of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to move for the first reading of the Bail Amendment Bill 2024.
Thank you, honorable member. Is there a seconder? Order the document be brought up. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Bail Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Bail Act.
For the first readings?
No for the first reading.
Thank you, honorable member. No. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I rise, Madam Speaker, to move for the second reading of the Ombudsman Bill 2023. As always, Madam Speaker, I'm grateful to God who gives me life and strength to be here, as many persons do not benefit from that grace. Madam Speaker, before I begin my substantive contribution, might I just say that on reflection, the two communications do touch and concern much of the same. And all we need to consider, Madam Speaker, is where the Junkanoo shacks are located. They're located in the same inner city, the same intercities. The persons complain about criminal elements being drawn from. And so, Madam Speaker, as we move the second reading of this bill, I just thought to make that observation. But may I begin, Madam Speaker, with a short consideration of a slightly paraphrased version of Proverbs 27, verses 15 to 20, which I would hope, Madam Speaker, to make relevant to the consideration at hand. And I read, Madam Speaker, and in verse 15 is where I make like amendment. And David writes, "A quarrelsome person is like the dripping of a leaky roof in a rainstorm. Restraining them is like restraining the wind, or grasping oil with the hand. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. The one who guards a fig tree will eat its fruit, and whoever protects their master will be honored. As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. Death and destruction are never satisfied, and neither are human eyes." Madam Speaker, as we reflect on the subject matter on everyone's mind today, that of a violent crime in this country, and as we look to pass in this Parliament another landmark institutional paradigm-changing piece of legislation, it's in my judgment and my submission, Madam Speaker, that these proverbs are applicable, and I will hope to show you how. Madam Speaker, the Ombudsman Bill is landmark in the sense that it provides for the citizen relief and a mechanism that had not previously been available. And the very simple nature of its importance can be gleaned from the preliminary report of the UN team that visited on arbitrary detention. Because notwithstanding all of the negative observations, they positively observed that the Ombudsman Bill had been tabled, and they look forward to its passage. And that is because Section 4 of the bill says this: the objectives of this act are to promote transparency, accountability, and integrity in administration and decision-making of authorities, and B, ensure the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms and international human rights as the foundation of a fair and just society. The bill provides, Madam Speaker, for a mechanism for appointment of the Ombudsman that is broad-based. It's not limited to governmental action only. And what is important, before I depart for a moment from the text of the bill, is the eligibility for appointment. And that is where I will found my submission to you, Madam Speaker, that we and I, having received messages this morning on my phone, must act for an ombudsman for the police and the Bahamian public this morning. The person eligible for qualification has to be so qualified to be appointed a justice of the Supreme Court. So that is a lawyer who has been in practice for 10 or more years. And he must have knowledge of the Constitution and principle of international human rights law, have experience in advocacy or adjudication of matters involving human rights, has knowledge and experience in public governance and administration, and is a person of integrity and good office. And lastly, the Ombudsman shall not be a public officer. Madam Speaker, the purpose of the Ombudsman is to address complaints of the citizens who are in my administration. I would contend, Madam Speaker, that the eligibility requirement go towards the quality that the ombudsman must possess, and will definitely set out how the ombudsman should go about their task. Complaints are easy to make. The function of the ombudsman will be to investigate complaints, to report, and to, in some circumstances, recommend and refer for action. And that will be at no expense to the citizen. The function of the ombudsman, I would contend, Madam Speaker, while it may be seen to be a benefit to the citizen, is also a benefit to the state and public officers. And why do I say that? I say that, Madam Speaker, because complaints are easy to make, and the function of the ombudsman will involve instances, falsifying complaints by investigation. We often say mouth can say anything. And so the ombudsman must be someone who can dispassionately look at a complaint, evaluate the factual and sometimes legal basis of the mistake, and then investigate the circumstances. And so, Madam Speaker, that benefits the person complained about and the state, because it might well be that finds that there is maladministration and is able to set out why and how it happens so that that can be addressed. And for those of us engaged as policymakers in ministries, both now and no doubt the party opposite previously would know, it is often useful to find out where the blockage is in public administration. Some ministers would like to know that as urgently as the members who are encountering these blockages, to know whether it is deliberate action of public servants, misinterpretation of policies and rules, or just a lack of knowledge in execution of one's duty. The Ombudsman, Madam Speaker, will permit an examination of all of that. Now, why do I say, Madam Speaker, it is my job today, although I am a public officer of sorts, to look at our present circumstance of crime in the prism of what the Ombudsman will be charged with doing. I say that, Madam Speaker, because as was read and I by the chaplain, there's a lot of power in the tongue, for good and for evil. And so, Madam Speaker, as I go back to the two communications, the Prime Minister's is on crime, addressing the bad actors in these communities, whereas the member for Angliston's communication is of the good that is Junkanoo, the good that is the art form that many of our young people engage in. And I continue to say in my position, Madam Speaker, that there are far more good young people than bad. The bad are just very fervent in their actions, while the good may not be so fervent. And so, Madam Speaker, when we speak on crime, we must approach it, in my view, through that prism and in that manner. We must look, Madam Speaker, at what is the problem that the Ombudsman will have to do. When a complaint is made, he will have to examine what is the problem. He will have to break the problem down in facts and the law or procedure, and then he will have to examine what is said. So approached in that fashion, Madam Speaker, the great complaint I've been receiving in the position I hold from senior officers and junior police officers is an observation that they don't always feel fully supported by all members of this place, and in some instances, the public, and for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, whose senior leadership is in conclave this morning, whom I addressed using the same proverb, that they don't feel that everyone appreciates what they're doing. And what do I mean by that, Madam Speaker? As I observed to the command of the Defense Force, I have received any number of video clippings of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago standing up, talking tough about putting their soldiers on the street and being lambasted about why aren't we considering that, only to have the Defense Force point out to me something that everyone should really know. In the Bahamas, our Marines already patrol the streets with our police officers. In fact, in these operations that happen, up to 50 of them are at a time, are committed to these saturation patrols that people are doubting. I don't know why they doubt it, because that's a form of negating the efforts of the police and the Defense Force. They are concerned, as I suppose the people who complain to an ombudsman would be concerned, that these things are happening and their contribution to the safety and security of this country are being undermined by persons calling into question their good and meritorious service in difficult circumstances. And so, Madam Speaker, it is concerning when you hear that. And so, as the Ombudsman will have to do, you will have to look at what is said, because we have many smartphones that are far smarter than the user. And so persons must know, when power is in the tongue, what you put out into the atmosphere has power. And so the police complained, and they had an occasion to issue a statement that with all of the violence going on, we still have people in social media who see the need to make up violence that have not happened in the Bahamas, happened elsewhere, or just make up stories. That is a legitimate complaint. And quite frankly, Madam Speaker, if the ambit of this bill was wider, it would merit investigation. But Madam Speaker, sitting right here today, listening to the remarks of the member for Marco City, the WhatsApp on my phone lit up with senior and junior police officers and others providing information of complaints about aspects of what's being said. And the Ombudsman, if he receives a complaint, must examine what is said factually. And so, Madam Speaker, if I might for a moment examine the proposition that the opposition has been available to give recommendations, that the implication is they've fallen onto onto not fertile soil, and they stand ready and willing to assist. Firstly, Madam Speaker, factually, if I was an ombudsman investigating this, my first observation fact would be that the summit was not a press event. It was attended by members of the communication branch, because up to that point, the cry of the opposition was, we must tell what we're doing. And so you really cannot complain if we then bring the mechanisms that do just that. but the recommendations that were given around the table were not given at police headquarters, but at OPM. And the fact of the matter, I'm reminded by the officials who were there, was that we were all being briefed on trends. Because the first thing an ombudsman must do is determine the facts. So he doesn't come to a conclusion before he determines the facts. And we were being given facts for reflection, digestion, and then response. But lo and behold, without the briefing having started, the opposition had this 4-page recommendation, not having heard a thing yet. They had a 4-page recommendation, which police officers have been blowing up my phone to say looks stunningly like the Commissioner of Police Policing Plan 2023 that was 2022 and 2023. And
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marco City.
Member for Freetown talked about facts. The fact is, I made the point that the invitation to the briefing, and that, which it was issued by the public relations arm of the government, and I made that point to underscore the fact that it was not the Royal Bahamas police force that invited us. I made the point that it was the PR department. It was not the special assistant to the Prime Minister or senior policy advisor. Yeah, that was one point that I made. The second point that was raised in terms of the recommendations were given in April. Some of those recommendations, I also indicated in the presentation, came from a number of reports and discussions internally within our party that has been available to Free National Movement and the progressive Party. And so, Madam Speaker, if we are talking about lifting,
what's the point of all that?
no, I'm saying you gave the impression that the PR writing us was a result of inviting us to a briefing, was a result of you being responsive to us about telling the story. I'm just simply saying, if it isn't a PR, if it isn't optics that you're aiming for, if it isn't a public relations exercise, then I was expecting the department that is responsible for the briefing to do the invitation. That was the point we made over and over in the press, that we saw public relations exercise because we didn't have a chance to, we did not have a chance to have a comprehensive discussion about the way forward. It was a briefing. That's all that we said in the press. And we gave the recommendations to you as well. So if we gave it to the Minister of National Security, so the police, the Prime Minister, and the Minister of National Security have a copy of the briefing. So our goal was to get it in the hands of police, and I presume that that's what you gave it to them.
I don't understand how that's a point of order, Madam Speaker, but I believe it makes a wider point that I'm seeking to make. An ombudsman who is somebody who's qualified to be a Supreme Court judge, who would be analytical, say that that is all an explanation to suggest by implication the police who did the briefing was somehow the plaything of anybody, and that is disrespectful to the police and a part of what their complaint is about. And so, Madam Speaker, the recommendations came in the sense that they did. If I am invited to a briefing about something, an ombudsman responding to a complaint will have to see, what are you saying? What are you complaining about? What are the facts? And so anyone may have their view of things, but you await the information from the professionals. And so the ombudsman, who is a senior lawyer, will know how lawyers act. When we matter medical negligence, we might think that we know what is happening. And the example I always give, Madam Speaker, to clients is, I represented an older man who had surgery, and the surgeon put an incision in his bowel instead of removing his prostate. And as a layperson, I thought that that had to be negligence. But trained persons realize you have to consult the professional. And every surgeon I spoke to said that that could happen without negligence, because when you open people up, their organs do not appear as they do in an anatomy book. And you could legitimately do that. And so, Madam Speaker, unless at point of order, Madam Speaker, I would not yield.
Madam Speaker, it may be useful, and I myself, I leave the House, would go and double check. Madam Speaker, we were invited to a discussion on crime. We wanted, it was not made, as an attorney, lucidly clear about a briefing. In fact, we started injecting that word into the public domain. In criticism of the government, we said we expected to have engaged in a way forward. What are the things we need to do in light of the spate of crime? That's what the discussion was about. So when we got there, we realized that that was not what was happening. What was happening is the police was briefing us on gang violence and its contribution to the numbers and the work that they were doing, which we applauded. We believe that it was and is wonderful work. But what we expected was we would be discussing the way forward, things that we could do as stakeholders in the room to contribute to lowering the numbers based on the high numbers. I believe it was 22 murders in the month of April. So we brought with us recommendations, so we didn't come swinging our hands. That's what the pages were about. The pages were our attempt to contribute to the work already being done by the government, by the police, and by others. I would think that that is what you essentially wanted. So don't give the impression to the public that we knew all we are coming to hear is about gang violence and its contribution to the numbers. We came expecting a discussion of what ways can we help, how can we contribute, and we were being armed with additional information. That's the point I'm making.
Again, that doesn't sound like a point of order, but again, it seems to make this point I'm making. March 2022 was a particularly bloody month. There was a summit held, and Marco City continues to say he felt there was a discussion about the way forward. Well, an ombudsman must first determine the facts. If the police do not share with you the motive for this, why this is happening, then how in the world are you going to come with results? If it is wholly domestic, and I will go through some of these recommendations because we received them and we considered them. And maybe to alleviate the anxiety of Marco City, I can go directly to them. Because, Madam Speaker, when the officers who have been harassing me on my WhatsApp say that this looks oddly like successive police officers' policing plan, they're not meaning to be dismissive of this. What they seem to be saying is, you've given these recommendations. If you paid attention to the plan that we've already set out, you would see that we have addressed these. Now, the first operational recommendation is increase police presence to either deter crime or enable quick response. Now, Madam Speaker, when you come to office and you have to recruit in 20 months, as many officers were recruited in the past 4.5 years, to put officers on the street, when you have to buy 100 patrol vehicles to enable saturation patrol, it should be the use Marco City's formulation pellucidly clear that the police, resourced by understands this. The fact that it wasn't happening when we got in the chair was the fact that there was a deficiency of manpower, which we moved to address. The fact that it couldn't happen was because of the deficiency of vehicles, which we moved to address. So nobody is being dismissive of their plan. What the officers are saying is, we agree. We agree that this should happen. Continuous commissioners of police have said this, and we're moving to address it. And nobody is casting any blame about who let manpower run down and vehicles run down, because the killer don't care. The killer does not care. The fact that is being made is you've given us this. We're doing this, and the frequency with which we're going to be able to do it will depend on as our manpower increase, as our resources increase, and they are being ingenious in their application. When they're short of manpower, the Commodore of the Defense Force, because we've reinstituted HON meetings, will be asked by his counterpart, the Commissioner of Police, could I have 50 Marines, please, to assist us with this? And they get it. But the fact that they have to ask in the first place is a function of letting police manpower down. And I see the letter written by the Commissioner of Police is an invitation not to be briefed, but my brother, he says, put on your boots, come ride with them, since you don't believe they're doing saturation patrol, let them show you. Let them be transparent with you, because they are not only answerable to the government, they're answerable to Bahamian people. And remember, Proverbs talk about he who serves the master isn't the Minister of National Security, isn't the Prime Minister, isn't the government, it's the people. And so you do well to understand when people are trying to do their best to serve. And then the next is eliminate habitats where criminality flourish. This includes eliminating derelict cars. I think urban renewal was designed to do that. Dilapidated homes, I think urban renewal was designed to do that. Overgrown lots, I think urban renewal was designed to do that before it was. And gathering spaces. So you're advocating urban renewal to come back and be pumped up. Okay, fine, we're doing that. Deploy intelligence officers throughout the inner city to proactively diffuse crime. This one really offends the police because it's to suggest that they're not doing it. I don't understand why anyone would believe that intelligence officers aren't deployed in the inner cities when there is a whole department that deals with nothing but intelligence. That is to suggest that the police officers are not doing their job. There's power in the tongue. Increase border protection and inspections, especially pleasure craft and private planes. People have no problem with that. That's being done. It is being done at a greater clip because we've gotten manpower up. We're getting more safe boats. It's being addressed. And so nobody is dismissive of it. But the approach to say, you have a point of order? You're in front of Kalani, but you're clearly not Kalani.
If you would yield.
Is it a point? If it's not a point of order,
if you won't yield, I'll press it but if you would yield.
you could address it when you make your contribution. And so many of these things are an insult to law enforcement because when you say this, the beginning statement, an ombudsman must look at things in stages. To say this is to say, number 3 is to say that's not happening. 4 is to say increase it. All right, fine. Go ahead.
The chair recognizes the honorable member.
I think the member for Freetown is inaccurate in stating that if you make a recommendation that that is the same thing as stating that it is not occurring when you make that recommendation. If I make a recommendation to the police that we need saturation patrols in particular areas, by making that recommendation, I am in no way saying that saturation patrols are not occurring. What I'm saying is that you need to do even more saturation patrols in that particular area. So by making these particular recommendations, it should not be an insult to the police force. We support the police force. That's why we are making those particular recommendations. So we are asking the police force to look at the saturation patrols, make an assessment as to whether or not they are being effective, whether or not they're accomplishing the roles and the purposes for which they are supposed to accomplish. That's what we are saying. We are not in any way suggesting that these things are not occurring.
Thank you, Honourable Member. You may continue, Honourable Member.
Madam Speaker, that's insulting. That's to suggest that the police have employed a strategy and aren't monitoring it. That's to suggest that they've engaged saturation patrol. There are no management and executive level policemen looking at the results, determining whether it's effective, to determine whether we need to shift tactics or not. The whole issue is we talk about avoiding political interference with operational policing. Well, the starting point from what East Grand Bahama just set out has to be an implication. Nobody is monitoring it, because if you say you should monitor it, it's like saying stop beating your wife. That's an assertion that you beat your wife in the first place. And that's a famous example judges give about assuming facts that are not in evidence that an ombudsman would know. Before you give that recommendation, one would think that as the ombudsman will be doing in a deliberate way, you would ask, what are the monitoring steps you're taking to assess the effectiveness of your methods? And then the police will tell you. So when you go to see the Commissioner of Police, as he has invited you, rather than assuming that they're not monitoring it, you would ask that question, which would simply say that when you say deploy intelligence officers throughout the inner city to proactively diffuse criminal activities and gather invaluable information, if you're telling them to do that, you must be saying that they're not doing it now, because you say it. When you talk about assessing effectiveness, you must be saying they're not doing it. We have very intelligent law enforcement officers. They know how to cut through the fat and get to the meat. And this is the reality of what this does. And then it says, engage regional partners towards the involvement of undercover national security operatives to infiltrate and dismantle organized gangs in the country. A complete anti-gang terrorist, anti-gang, anti-firearm unit that is made up of every law enforcement agency in this country, that has officers from the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm Administration of the U.S. embedded with them, that has Homeland Security investigations embedded with them, that accesses intelligence from the CARICOM network. All of this is regional and international, but you're telling them to engage with regional partners as if they're not doing it now. It's insulting. And then you say, extend the Neighborhood Watch program to the inner city. And this is said at a time that the actual initiating documents had to be settled by this administration. There was no initiating document settled. They're settled now, and so watch programs can use them to access facilities. So you're saying this, and there are consequences of what you're saying. And then you say, expand the capacity to utilize drones. I really don't think you should be talking about the drones. But since you talk about it here, and to tie their deployment to the short spotter system implemented by the FNM, that is correct. You implemented short spotter to, I think it was 8 square miles or something like that. We had to expand it, but governments are continuous. But let me be clear about the drones, since this is coming up. The concept of drones is a good one. It's a tool that every law enforcement agency engaged in it admits that they needed. The problem was in execution. So, this is to suggest that you will have a solution, that this solution was contracted for in this $17 million that was paid, that a short spotter alert goes off, that these drones that are in the nest opens up, and the drone flies to the area. The planning being that the drone has to fly at least 6 miles, because that's how you place the nest, and that then you follow the action. The problem is that is not what you ended up contracting for. You didn't actually contract for any software to connect the drones to short spotter. And so while we were able to be aggressive with SWIFT, who is being responsive, to say you provided a drone that cannot fly 6 miles because of radio interference, and they worked to improve that. But they're quite clear with their position. We will help you to locate software that can communicate between the two, but you got to pay separately for that, because that's not in this contract. And they're correct. And the contract that was documented, and this was a scandal in the press, permitted for you to have paid 80% of the money when you only receive 15% of the product, because that is how badly you documented the agreement. Fortunately, the vendor has been cooperating, and I must say, to their credit, they've been cooperating. So where they say you didn't ask for sufficient cable, if the underwater submersible goes down 200 feet, you only had 50 feet of cable because you didn't ask for 200 feet of cable. Little small things like that, yes. And there are 2 of them, underwater vehicles. No, we're just talking about, by MP, we're just talking about how badly you all documented this agreement. When you ask for blimps, you did document that correctly, because at least you say the blimps had to be able to operate in high winds, and these ones cannot, and so they have accepted them back. But this concept of this nest solution, if what you wanted, you didn't document for it, and yes, this is something that the Royal Bahamas Police Force wants, and yes, we're working on getting for them. So we do look at your recommendations. We believe that any Bahamian, right-thinking Bahamian, does not want to see this carnage on the street. So we're not dismissive of you. You say increase and enhance monitoring of persons on bail. Well, when we come to the bail amendments, you'd see how we, after reflection and consultation, are addressing that. And then the really insulting one for the police: encourage police to introduce the element of surprise, as if they don't have undercover officers. And you know, I did listen, Madam Speaker, to Marco City on Morning Bell, on Morning Blend, and this idea that the police should put undercover cars in the community. Well, the car is undercover. How are you going to know that it's a police car? And so, Madam Speaker, I was stuck in my car. Go ahead, ma'am.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marco City.
Madam Speaker, the point I made, not just this morning on Morning Blend, but otherwise, was there is a need for additional patrol cars. In fact, if we go back through the statements made in this place, as well as by a number of officers, they agree that they are under-resourced. Was under-resourced under us in respects, and is under-resourced under this administration in some respects. So the point, the point is having additional resources is what we're advocating. And as it relates to undercover, unmarked vehicle, it being the correct term, officers have lights that they are able to turn on in a car that is recognized as a civilian car. So before you get too tempting to give the impression you are brilliant and the rest of us are slow, I'm saying the point I made over and over was simply that there should, apart from there being police identified vehicles, we are saying increase the number of also unmarked vehicles. We know the police have unmarked vehicles, but we also know they don't have sufficient. And how would you then know that it's a police car? That if they need to activate the lighting, they have the ability to do so. That's the point I make.
Thank you, honourable member.
Now, Madam Speaker, it just gets worse. It just gets very worse, because we have, and I vouch for them, we have intelligent, experienced police officers. We have intelligent, educated policemen. We have educated police officers. And you know, this anger is a part of why we have a lot of starving and crime in this country. People are watching us. Madam Speaker, people are watching us. And I have said, and everybody has said, and what the Prime Minister said to us as ministers, who he instructed in writing from the beginning what to do, is we have to come up with novel ways to conflict resolution and anger, which is driving a lot of knife crime in this country, where, yes, the ingenuity of our surgeons saved the persons, but we have to be careful, very careful. The one thing Marco City should be very aware about my history before coming to this place is that I represent police officers charged in the coroner's inquest for free. I represented the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, who were alleged of the abuse at the detention center against the Cubans, for free. And so everyone is very clear about the job of lawyers, but we're going to reach that point in these recommendations, and we still in operational. But what is being suggested is our trained police officers who have resources that they have to manage. They will determine the best operational use of their resources, not politicians, police officers, because they are the professionals. And so, Madam Speaker, that is what they struggle with. I stay in my lane in far as when they request resources, I go to battle to seek to get them the resources. Once they get the resources, it's then for them as professionals to use it. I regard it as an insult to tell a professional person how to practice their profession. And so, Madam Speaker, 10, and we still in operation, have reintroduced foot patrols in crime-ridden areas. You have patrols, you have walkabout, and Elizabeth even buy her officers some bicycles to patrol her constituency on bicycles. Bicycles. And the thinking, and they were gratefully received by the OC of Elizabeth Estates Police Station, is that the officers will be in the open air, driving at a rate that they can observe what is happening and interact with the people. So nobody is dismissive of what you're saying. It's a bit insulting in certain areas, but the police deal with that every day. Administratively, allocate and carefully manage resources required by police and defense force officers so they can outperform the criminals they're presently competing with. I don't think they're competing with them because a competition involves having a common goal. They are getting them. And again, this is sort of inconsistent because we find that the Royal Bahamas Police Force, for some inexplicable reason, Madam Speaker, their capital budget is managed by the Ministry of National Security, while the Defense Force manages their own capital budget. It's as if somebody in the Ministry of National Security wanted to continue to exercise operational control over the police, although they were content to have the Defense Force spend their own capital budget as they see fit. Little things like this, Madam Speaker, resonate with the persons who know it. Madam Speaker, intersectorial, engage faith-based organizations and other social partners to empower their existing anti-crime initiatives or work to help them introduce more. Accepted, happening. I don't think it's a need for us to sit and talk about that. Everyone should be doing their part. The Minister said that, I've said that, everyone agreed that in Vision 2040. Provide counseling for family and friends of murdered and raped victims to address the anger, shame, and desire to take revenge. Accepted. I believe by the time of this meeting, the Commissioner already announced his domestic violence, sexual offense, holistic center. So, all right, you tell us that, they're doing that. They're quite fine with that. Yes. The Christian Council has been engaged, and they have numbers on the website. And so it's not that anyone is dismissive of your recommendations. If they're already being executed, then that's just a function of we all agree that this should be happening. Thank you for your concurrence. You won't be objecting to the proposals. The medium-term recommendations are set out there. The one that stands out is reduce political interference in day-to-day operations of law enforcement agencies. We wholeheartedly accept that. We don't intend to be trying to tell the police how they should do policing, the Defense Force how they should carry out their mandate. We intend to listen to the professional advice of these law enforcement officials. And from the time this minister came to the chair, Madam Speaker, I made it clear I'm not a policeman. I'm not a soldier. And so the things that address that are properly left with those agencies. And I do not go on crime scenes because I'm not a policeman. They do their thing. They tell me what they need to do their thing, and my job is to get it for them. And so wholeheartedly, it's interesting that it's worded as reduce political interference, but that's accurate from the administration where 2 ministers were judicially condemned of interfering with the police. And so the only part about that we take offense to is we didn't start any of it, so there's nothing for us to reduce. We pledge not to be like Dr. Sands or my immediate predecessors in the police. We pledged that from the beginning. That continues to be our position. And so it's insulting to say reduce something that is not happening. But there you go. Okay, as a man thinks in his heart, Proverbs says, so is he. 6 is create new gang legislation to encourage formation and membership of gangs, and to review legislation of other countries that have similar issues. Yes, we're doing that. We're not dismissive of your recommendation, and we're doing that now. It would have been useful if it was done before. It wasn't done before, but we're doing it now. We don't have a problem with that. So I don't, for myself, see that we're at odds about your recommendations, which align with the Commissioner of Police Crime Plan published at the beginning of every year. Vision 2040, our plan, is not a problem. Establish an intersectorial nonpartisan crime commission. There is one we set up in the ministry, and we must admit we met it set up. Perhaps you didn't realize that you left one in place, but there's one in place, and it's chaired by Dr. David Allen, and it meets in the meeting room of the Ministry of National Security. So we have no problems with that. Establish consultative committees in each police division. That sounds like urban renewal. Work with community-based partners to identify potential problems. That sounds like urban renewal as we're bringing it back. Implement a gun amnesty and a reward system. We're not dismantling Crime Stoppers. Create a range of employment, training, socialization, and recreational programs. That sounds like urban renewal, I think, as we're bringing it back now, which you wouldn't have to make this recommendation if you had dismantled it. But that sounds like what we're bringing back. Create and enhance recreational spaces, parks, and communities where people of all ages can be accommodated. I think that sounds like community centers, that we intend to aggressively build. I think that sounds like Wi-Fi on the park. I think that sounds like CCTV on the park. Publish and distribute a directory of all youth organizations. I think they register with the Ministry of Youth. I could be mistaken. Increase effort to decrease the backlog in our courts. I say this with all sincerity. The Chief Justice has consented to a task force to address just this. The membership of it is now being settled. Since if you don't say it in public or in this place, it doesn't happen, you are publicly invited to submit the name of anyone you wish to serve on that task force, preferably somebody who is in one of the stakeholder groups that interface in criminal trials. And to be clear, that includes judges, magistrates who the court will provide, lawyers who prosecute, defend, even jurors, but it should be a juror who has some deal with the system, probation officers, social workers, everyone. It's a whole of government effort, and it also ties in stakeholders, so you're invited openly. Improve correctional facilities, including increasing rehabilitation programs. Well, when the two deputies returned to the correctional facility, it only took re-engaging programs that were left in place in 2017, and that has started. Separating first-time youth offenders from generals and population. We built an entire youth detention facility for the first time. It was opened by the First Lady, and it is operational. So, of course, we agree. Even though you sent this, we were working on it. Facilitating orderly integration in society after time served and working out compensation for prison work. That is underway. And again, publicly, it's been happening publicly, but since the tongue, and this is being suggested as brand new, as Elizabeth likes to, as Yamakwa likes to say, we're consulting on the conditional release of offenders bill that addresses just this. And then considering the given to participation of high school students in voluntary work. Angliston, that's actually a requirement for the high school diploma. And so not only does it not need to be a recommendation, but it exists currently as one of the requirements for people to get a high school diploma. The government support of all churches and other youth establishments, this government and this Prime Minister recognize the value of the church, and that is why we started with the National Day of Prayer. It will continue. We believe in the power of prayer. We believe that everyone ought to be different if they do meet the one true God. And so we will definitely encourage that, and we do. Incentivize Big Brother type organizations. And service clubs such as Rotary, Rotaract, Kiwanis Youth and Zonta clubs and lodges, and Friendly Society should all develop mentorship programs. That's in fact true, it happens. My lodge, Lodge St. David, has a mentorship program at Gerald Cash Primary School called the Boys Club of Excellence. Nobody takes any issue with your recommendations other than when they are insulting, as implying the police are not doing things that they are in fact doing, implying that members of civil society are not doing things and they're doing it. You know, there's a very simple quote, and God bless the departed, but Michael Jackson says, start with yourself. So I will do this. If, as was wrongly asserted, the plan of this government was not laid out, UB invited me to the Public Policy Institute when I gave an address about government crime strategy, which is consistent with the national address the Prime Minister made. And at the beginning of that address, I quoted a different Proverbs to train up your child in the way he should go. At the end of that presentation, I asked some pointed questions that I repeat in this place to all of us, which is, if you see a young person going wrong, in essence, what do you do about it? Do you correct the young person? If you don't correct them, do you advise their parents or guardians so that they can correct them? Are you a mentor to anybody? You personally. You see, one of the captains in the Defense Force today said something and provided a quote about how they feel we could address this. And it is something that's very simple. And why we have to do it personally is, he cited Ecclesiasticus 4 and 12, which reads, and someone may overpower one alone, but two together can take a stand against him, and a threefold cord cannot quickly be torn apart. An American president's to the power of one. So you make all of these suggestions. Since this started, any number of persons has encountered the Ministry of National Security for support. On Saturday past, I attended St. Matthew's Church Hall. Reverend Father Scott Jupp and his team launched the PrEP mentorship program. And what is significant about Father Scott Jupp is some young fellas stole the church car from him at gunpoint. He was victim of armed robbery. And rather than react in a different way, his reaction is to say, let me see if I can help these young men. And so he asked the government to encourage him to do anything. He did it. And you know what was disappointing about it? And I'll just share this with you, Marco City. My ministry sent out a blast to the press because we felt, okay, the minister is going to be there. The press may see some value in covering this. But they sent one cameraman, no journalist. And I had occasion to tell the people there assembled, if it were a murder scene, you would have cameras, still cameras, video cameras, an abundance of reporters. And so when we talk about incentivizing these mentorship programs, you know, and that was said too, you know, Marcus, and he say there's some shortage on the weekend or in the night. But every murder scene in the night, I'm able to watch on TV, live. So it is just as the police have a choice as to how they deploy their resources. We have a choice, including the press, as to how you deploy your resources. We deploy our resources because Cat Island, San Salvador, and Ramkey gave me directions in writing in September 2021 as to what my priorities were to be. And so everyone has their priorities, and it's very simple. These will do their policing, aided by the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, in some instance immigration, and customs, for that matter. We will do the limbs aggressively that relate to prevention. We will put our efforts on them in providing them the tools. We will look to make other systemic changes in how we do the business of justice in this country so that we can speed up the process, as we have already done in firearms trial, as we will now seek to do in the revocation of bail for people who aren't behaving. We will do what is necessary to activate rehabilitation, and make no mistake about it, we will also do the part that says you will serve every day the court asks you, some in the correctional facility and some in the community. We will ensure that that part is changed, because we will not just get together to talk about it. We're concerned with using our resources to do something about it. At the end of the day, talk must cease and action must begin. At the National Day of Prayer, for all that people say about prayer, every minister out there recognize that at some point you get off your knees and you go into the community, you stop praying and you start working. The one thing I would challenge everyone who says we wish to work collaboratively is, let's stop talking about it and let's see some action. Any program, and this is very sincere, any program that can be conceived, and you do not, as Marco City says, have to be in government to be involved. Any program that can be conceived, if it requires assistance from a government agency, we have been tasked to have an all of society remedy to this. Any program that can be sensibly conceived, can stand on any. We spend our time assessing for assistance. And by assistance, we mean testing. You may need the police to assist you with something, the defense force to assist you with something. But it's time, really and truly, Mr. Speaker, that people put up or shut up. We've really reached that time in this country, because the criminals, they're not really doing a lot of talking. They're doing a lot of acting. And it therefore takes those of us who are on the good to act. Because it was said that all it takes for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing. All right, and that says to do nothing. They could talk, but if you do nothing, evil will prosper. That is the message that steps forward, and that is the challenge. I don't recall, Madam Speaker, getting any second set of recommendations. I've consulted with all the heads of the law enforcement that we have responsibility for. We have no record of having received the second set of recommendations, just as the ombudsman will have to look at everything before he pronounces. We're open to it. Having listened to them being read, they sound to be a call to return to moral values. I remember hearing the member for Cat Islands and Salvador and Ramkey speak to that, so I suspect we will have no problem with those obvious recommendations. The only problem, Madam Speaker, is most people already live by it. The wicked, evil people do not, and they're the ones we have to reach and the ones who are headed in that direction. But if it's been tabled, I will certainly undertake, Madam Speaker, to get them. Because you see, Madam Speaker, this relates to this ombudsman bill. Because, and I would make this point in my final minutes, the Prime Minister has made it clear, the Commissioner of Police has made it clear that they are vigorous. And so the ombudsman is necessarily also as a protection if anyone steps over the line. So at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, the police will do what they wish to do. The Prime Minister has made it obvious that we're respecting constitutional rights. We are, by this bill, imposing, creating an office that the citizen can have recourse to free of charge to forward any complaint should any law enforcement officer be said to have stepped out of line. Good policemen never run away from scrutiny. And so, Madam Speaker, this is a necessary protection for law-abiding citizens. It is again another institution created by the party who have created every institution in this country. And for that reason, I'm proud to move this bill, and Freetown would move for the second reading and committal of this bill.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
Madam Speaker, I rise today grateful to the Almighty God for the mercy He has shown towards myself, my family, this country, and to all who call this country home. I also remain extremely grateful to the wonderful people of Centerville for the opportunity they have given me to represent them in these honorable halls. Team Centerville, Madam Speaker, is still hard at work in the constituency. And since the last time I spoke in this place, we have endeavored to continue our efforts to assist constituents. And we also commit to continuing our efforts in the community and lend our support to positive programs geared towards constituents. I take this time to thank those corporate citizens who sponsored our initiatives last year, and also the Centerville Urban Renewal Team, whose hard work is immeasurable in the constituency, and who, as we speak, Madam Speaker, are hosting an adolescent seminar on conflict resolution at the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Centerville. Madam Speaker, in this vein, as the representative of the people of Centerville, I must speak to the fact that we have lost too many souls, predominantly young men, to gun violence on our streets. I've seen firsthand the anguish, devastation of those who witnessed the carnage that has taken place on our streets. We have the unfillable voids left in families because no matter what we may think, each life is precious to the persons who love them. Not only has Centerville experienced this violence, but there has been killings in communities around the island. And just last week, Abaco recorded its first homicide for the year, when a man was gunned down, I think in Dundas Town. Since the first of this year, there's been a murder almost every day, several this past weekend. And I think we all can collectively say and agree, it needs to stop. While we are having our varying takes on the cause for the violence on our streets, we must come together to address this issue in a holistic and consistent manner. Over previous years and decades, successive governments have had to contend with the issue of crime and violence, as from time to time the number of homicides and other criminal activity rises. I believe that those of us who presently occupy this chamber, representatives of the people, must come together to ensure that we can collectively demonstrate to Bahamian citizens that we are serious about arresting the issue of crime in the country and ensuring that persons feel safe in their own homes and communities. I'm cognizant that crime and the solutions to crime have been fodder for political mileage in the past, but I also understand that that does not provide comfort to the mothers, fathers, grandmothers, significant others, or siblings of someone who was gunned down in our streets. Marco City said earlier that he himself suffered the loss of a relative. Madam Speaker, this sort of political fodder does not help to reassure, and when I say that, I don't mean the comments made by Marco City about his relative, but I'm speaking generally. But political fodder, Madam Speaker, does not help to reassure citizens who are afraid to come out of their homes after dark or to go certain places around the island because they are cautious and fearful of something happening to them or their property. The Bahamian people want to see unity on this issue. This does not mean that this side and the opposite side cannot disagree on certain aspects of the approach. However, I do think that the time has come for crime to be treated as a national issue in need of the attention of every sector and every citizen of this country. Madam Speaker, I sincerely hope that we have not reached a point where people have become numb to the severity of murder and other serious crimes. I find it quite unfortunate, I must say, that in the Bahamas today, the bereaved relatives find out about the violent death of their loved ones by viewing some gruesome pictures and videos that are widely circulated on social media platforms. I tend to think that people are more outraged than entertained by the carnage on our streets. By now, Madam Speaker, anyone who knows me and is familiar with my contributions in this place knows that I'm fond of quoting the father of our nation, the Right Honorable Sir Lyndon Pinling. And you can find a quote from him to impact almost any aspect of social life. It was October 1975 when Sir Lyndon, speaking on the subject of the Bahamian youth, said, and I quote, "The frustrations they feel are very real. The problems they have are very real. The solutions then must be real and viable. But the problems are ours too. They are the problems of all Bahamians. There's no room for partisanship, and none should seek to gain mileage or unduly criticize efforts, for we all owe it to our young people to secure their future. We must all lend a helping hand. The problems are too grave for us to let them go unnoticed. The efforts are national, irrespective of our political persuasions, social status, or cultural barriers," end quote. Madam Speaker, I am grateful to our law enforcement officers for putting their lives on the line daily to protect and serve us. I also commend every teacher, counselor, volunteer worker, pastor, and parent, etc., who invest their time into the young people to ensure that they become productive citizens in this Bahama land. We can all agree that our young people are the future and are our best resource. We must save as many of them as possible from a life of crime and violence. The Bahamas is too rich a place with potential that can be positively exploited for so many people to be engaged in killing each other instead of helping each other succeed. We here today must change the paradigm. It is obvious to anyone that is paying attention that the constant back and forth is not helping the average Bahamian. We understand where we are based on the efforts of our predecessors. We must consider where our country and its citizens will be years from now if we remain satisfied with politics and business as usual on this important issue. Madam Speaker, with that being said, I now turn my attention to the bill before us for deliberation. The Ombudsman Bill is one which we believe is a step in the right direction in empowering Bahamians and retaining their trust in government. The office which this bill establishes has the potential to become one of the most important in the entire government. Its functions, as laid out in the bill, serve to protect citizens who make legitimate complaints, while simultaneously doing the same for the holders of public offices by conducting impartial investigations and making relevant recommendations. Section 7(1)(c) of the bill states that another function of the Ombudsman is to promote public awareness of fundamental rights and freedoms through the provision of information and education. I believe that this will prove to be one of the more important functions of the office, because people cannot advocate and defend their rights within the law if they are ignorant of what the law is. Just last year, Madam Speaker, we debated and established a Committee on Human Rights in this place. Another function of the Ombudsman that I would like to highlight further bolsters the Bahamas' commitment on this issue. Section 7, subsection 1E reads as follows: in conjunction with the Attorney General, to monitor and promote compliance with international and domestic human rights law by any of the following subsections. 1, making recommendation to the government as to the execution and ratification of an international human rights instrument. 2, reviewing existing and proposed legislation for consistency within international human rights and recommending additional legislative or other measures to protect fundamental rights and freedom. And thirdly, advising the government on its reporting obligations under international human rights instruments and the content of those reports where required. Section 20 of the bill speaks to the discovery of any breach of fundamental human rights of a complainant. It directs the Ombudsman to document any determined breaches in a report for the offending authority and the complainant. The bill goes even further to instruct that the report be delivered to the Governor General, the Speaker of the House of Assembly, the President of the Senate, and the Minister with responsibility for the offending authority. Madam Speaker, I believe that this will provide the necessary accountability to ensure that complaints and recommendations for remedy and change are adequately addressed. This legislation also provides for complaints to be made to the Office of the Ombudsman by citizens who are detained. Section 9, subsection 4 allows those detained to be provided the necessary tools to make their complaints, and for the same complaints to be delivered to the Office of the Ombudsman. And it reads as follows. Where a person who is detained in custody or otherwise confined in an institution, person in charge or other person performing duties in connection with his detention or confinement that he wishes to make a complaint to the Ombudsman, the person informed shall, A, provide writing paper and utensils and an unsealed envelope to the complainant, B, take all other steps necessary to facilitate the making of the complaint, and C, without delay, deliver the sealed envelope containing the complaint to the Ombudsman. Madam Speaker, this legislation also speaks to how the Office of the Ombudsman is to conduct investigations along with its investigative jurisdiction and how the evidence is to be obtained. Important to note for those who in future will seek the assistance of this office and for those who will be the subject of investigations conducted by this office are the provisions of Section 14 of the bill, which states, if during the course of an investigation or thereafter, the Ombudsman is of the opinion that there is evidence of any breach of duty or misconduct on the part of any officer or employee of an authority which may amount to a criminal offense, he shall refer the matter to the Commissioner of Police. 2, where the Ombudsman makes a reference to the Commissioner of Police, proceedings under this act with respect to the investigation under subsection 1 shall be stayed pending the determination of the Commissioner. Madam Speaker, I also note that this bill provides for repercussions for those who would obstruct the work of the Office of the Ombudsman. In Section 27, subsection 1 states, any person who without lawful justification or excuse obstructs, insults, hinders, or resists the Ombudsman in the performance of his or her functions under this act commits the offense of contempt and is liable on summary conviction for not exceeding $10,000 or 6 months imprisonment. This provision is an indication that this administration takes serious the work of this office and the positive impact it will have on the government agencies as envisioned. The word ombudsman is of Swedish origin and is said to mean the representative of the people. And this is exactly the role that the holder of this office will take. The ombudsman will be tasked with ensuring that the rights of the Bahamian people interacting with their government are upheld. He or she will be asked to conduct themselves in a way that is not only impartial, but as their only loyalty in carrying out their duties should be to our country, its laws, and its citizens. Many countries and companies around the world utilize an ombudsman in some form or another. While some may see this addition as another layer of bureaucracy, those who will use this service will indeed understand its value. The creation of this office as a fully functioning body will now change the way in which the government conducts its business and how we serve those in need of our service. This, Madam Speaker, is a good thing. Madam Speaker, the Bahamian people have entrusted all of us in this to lead them. They have given us the chance to show them that we can bring about changes that will make their lives better and protect them and their interests. I believe that the introduction of an ombudsman into the public sector will not only assist in protecting the interests of the Bahamian people, but will undoubtedly make the government work better for us all. Madam Speaker, with that being said, Centerville supports and seconds this bill.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for St. Anne's.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm going to start my contribution now, and I'll before the walk break. Madam Speaker, as I stand to give my contribution on the ombudsman bill, which we have set down for today.
Honourable Member, before I allow you to so move on, allow me to process, and then you will continue. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and tabled. A bill for an act to provide for the office of ombudsman. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried.
Obliged, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I rise to give my contribution to the debate on the ombudsman bill, that time is limited before the customary break at 1 o'clock. However, I think it's important that I take the opportunity now to do so. Oh, this phone won't shut off, Madam Speaker. Just give me a moment. Hello? I'm really right now. I can't. All right, go ahead then. No, I'll be out at 1 o'clock. I can't deal with that now. Madam Speaker, you'll note that my phone is completely off. I was making an example, Madam Speaker, that poor choices and bad behavior in public naturally
I am so glad.
Madam Speaker, I was
Madam
giving...
Speaker almost had you moved.
Yes, Madam Speaker. And you would be right in taking that action, Madam Speaker. Debbie Bartlett on ZNF every night used to tell us that for every action there's an equal and positive reaction.
Yes.
And what I was demonstrating there is that the poor choices that people take and examples of bad behavior in public naturally captures the attention and demands correction, Madam Speaker. And where we find ourselves in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas right now is under a crisis in murders that are happening on all parts, Madam Speaker, Abaco included, all parts of New Providence included. There's just been a travel advisory by the U.S. Embassy, Madam Speaker, that's been issued today. U.S. Embassy, Nassau, the Bahamas, January 24th, 2024, security alert. Advises U.S. citizens to be aware that 18 murders have occurred in Nassau since the beginning of 2024. Murders have occurred at all hours, including broad daylight. On the streets, retaliatory gang violence has been the prime motive in 2024 murders. Actions to take, Madam Speaker, under this advisory, which all of the tourists coming to this country will now see, Madam Speaker, actions to take, exercise extreme caution in the eastern part of New Providence Island, Nassau. When walking or driving at night, Madam Speaker, keep a low profile, Madam Speaker, and do not physically resist armed robbery. Madam Speaker, no one can quell the fact that we have a crime crisis occurring in our country right now. We have crime strategy plans presented by the government, crime strategy plans presented by the opposition. The effort to quell the crime crisis in this country with 18 murders, 17 reported to my knowledge by the press in the country for 2024, has turned, in my opinion, based on what I've seen today, focus for Marco City. Now, the attention given to Marco City is as a result of his proactive approach to addressing the crime issue in this country, raising the awareness, and speaking on behalf of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Did I get any reaction by the government outside of the prayer breakfast? When we got to the point of the prayer breakfast, I think at that stage, we all knew the National Day of Prayer. We all knew that this crime issue needed the attention of the entire country. However, the murders continued after that, and the crime plans were slow to come or came after the leader of the opposition brought attention to it. No fault, Madam Speaker. The fact is, as I've seen here, all of the attention given to Marco City, as the former minister would say, dog don't park at park car. You know, so obviously, Madam Speaker, the member for Marco City is being effective in what he's doing. Madam Speaker, just that little attention back from the government side. And I heard someone say, just calm down, just calm down. Everything is calm over there. You know, we're doing this in the plan. We're doing that in the plan. Oh, that really sounds like urban renewal, doesn't it? Oh, this sounds like urban renewal, doesn't it? If everything was hunky-dory they want to paint, the people wouldn't have us in here agitating for this matter of murder to be addressed. We can't downplay this. We cannot downplay the severity of the situation that we're in, and it is highlighted now this morning by this U.S. advisory to its citizens. This should be of advisory that our Bahamian citizens should also receive. But let me tell you, I, as a member of Parliament, I don't live in a gated community. I don't have 24-hour armed security. I don't ride around with somebody that's carrying a gun on them. I take my protection extremely seriously. When I'm at home, I get inside my home quickly. But, Madam Speaker, I'm at the 5-minute mark. I have 5 more minutes left. And if we look where we are now, I've not been keeping abreast with the social media reports and the news reports that may have transpired this morning, but we're at the 24th of January. The 23rd of January, SO East Street South Station, 17-year-old man shot point blank. I saw the video. The man walked from across the yard, Madam Speaker, as though he was just passing through, got up to the young person behind the pump. Gun must have been less than 2 feet away from his head or his body, and he pulled the trigger. The young man's body collapsed on the ground. I pray to God that the good reports we're getting that he's in stable condition at the hospital continue to remain his case. But, Madam Speaker, also on the 23rd in Grand Bahama Street, in Grand Bahama, Oleander Street, we had a man shot. We had a double shooting on the 22nd in Abaco in Cooperstown, Madam Speaker. Both men in Abaco appear to be in stable condition. On the 21st, Madam Speaker, we had a murder. A woman shot dead in Baintown, South Street and Hospital Lane. Also on the 21st, Madam Speaker, a man was murdered in a double shooting in one man died on the scene, a 21-year-old man. The second man was first reported to be the victim of a shooting, the same incident. And it's, to my understanding, that second man was taken to hospital but later succumbed to his injuries. That's 2 murders from the 21st that occurred. The woman that lost her life in Bain Branchtown was the 3rd. The 20th, we didn't see any incident. The 19th of January, a 40-year-old man was shot by Market Street and West End Avenue. On the 19th, the news reported in the Nassau Guardian that January murders doubled between this year and last year for the same period. So between January 1st and January 18th and 2023, there was 7 murders. Between January 1st and January 18th of 2024, there were 14 murders. Something serious is happening, and we can't just try to explain it down as though it's being addressed. There needs to be change, and my looking at this bail act, the bail act is one part, but it doesn't go far enough. On the 18th of January, there were no murders, no shootings reported. On the 17th, Jason Lamb at the intersection of Park Road and Village Road. Village Road, on the eastern side of Village Road, is my constituency, St. Anne's, Madam Speaker. The murder of Jason in St. Anne's would make, by my recollection, the 4th murder in the St. Anne's constituency in less than 24 months, more like 16 months, Madam Speaker. I was hoping to have the exact data. A woman was shot in her driveway on Johnson Road. A man was shot in his driveway on Johnson Road in different incidents. I've heard from my constituency office this week that there have been police patrols up and down. Kelly Lane getting blocked off. The little park that we have under renovation in the back of the Johnson Road office. Police cars are parking up there. Up and down, up and down. Murders are happening everywhere, Madam Speaker. On the 17th, Pine Yard Road, a man was shot. A man in his early 20s, Madam Speaker, was shot. On the 16th, Sion Davis in Dundas, he goes by an alias that many of the persons are probably calling off on the name now. He was murdered, Madam Speaker. On January 15th, we had the National Day of Prayer. On the 14th, no murders were reported. Friday, January 12th, Carmichael Road, there was a fight between 2 men. One man was stabbed multiple times in his neck, ran across the road, fell, collapsed, succumbed to his injuries. On the same day, on January 12th, the Tribune reported more killed through January 11th than at any other time in over a decade, pulling the murder rate ahead of 2015, when at that time the record was 146. Wake up. We must wake up, Madam Speaker. And this government, this executive, has the greatest control over the resources of our tax-paying dollars. They have to act. I don't want to highlight the fact that I've seen people in zoos or I've seen people reclining in easy boy chairs, or I've seen one of my members of my constituency in Africa, along with the member for Fox Hill. Why they're still in Africa, I don't know. I'd like to go one day. Maybe I'll get the government to pave my way as well. But really, there is a crisis happening here in the country, and all hands need to be on deck. No minister should be out of the country right now. Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, on the 11th, 2 women were shot off Wolf Road. That was a shooting. There was a murder also on the 11th. The grandmother by Quacko Street Police Station, in front of the police station. I think the shooting last night on East Street South was in front of another police station, Madam Speaker. You had then on the 8th of January, the Commissioner of Police stated, and the press reported it, we must change the laws on bail. There's some movement on the change of laws on bail right now. The 8th of January, murder of a 16-year-old girl, Ebony Gray, in her home. 11th grade student, R.M. Bailey Park, Nassau Village. Is that not serious enough? Also on the 8th of January, man on steps on East Street South was shot multiple times to his upper torso, Madam Speaker. He collapsed, head down, going down the stairs. Madam Speaker, 7th, which was Friday, a man died from injuries to his head after an argument with another man off Carmichael Road. Also on Friday, at 8 p.m. in Nassau, a man shot several times at junction of Forbes Street and Alexandria Boulevard. Madam Speaker, the list continues. I'm just going to finish now. On the 3rd of January, 2 were murdered in broad daylight. The lady Chateray Wells, a 27-year-old woman, and Dino Smith, shot right in front of our main thoroughfare on Prince Charles Drive, just west of Pinder's Tile, that intersection before Commonwealth Bank. Broad daylight. Children in the car had bullets that went through their vehicle. One boy was injured from the shattered glass, Madam Speaker. That was the wake-up call to the country. The murder hasn't stopped. Where is the example of the wake-up call from this government, other than to look at Marco City and tell them, we knew everything you're telling us now. We knew all that already. We don't want to know what you know. We want to see what you're doing, and until you stop, we don't believe that you've done enough. Madam Speaker, there was also murders on the 2nd and murders on the 1st. That murder on the 1st was when the son stabbed his father, and that was the first murder of the year. Madam Speaker, the Ombudsman Bill is a piece of legislation that I approve of. There could have been greater strengths, Madam Speaker. If I can have 2 minutes, I'll just finish on that.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for free.
Just to formally move that the House continues to sit after 1 p.m.
Thank you, Honourable. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Honourable members. It is moved and seconded that the business of the House proceed beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many are in favour will remain seated. Those stand.
Thank you
The
very
motion is
much.
carried. Business of this House will proceed beyond the 1 p.m. hour. You may continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The Ombudsman Bill has been approved. There is a committee that will appoint the Ombudsman under the bill. There's qualifications for the Ombudsman to serve in the office. The Organization Responsible Government Org has done a comparative review of this tabled bill as well as the previously tabled bill under the FNM administration, as well as bills tabled and in place in other countries within our region. There is a report that they've given, Madam Speaker, and I'm going to ask that I be able to table that report so that it's in our records, so that this administration and future administrations can call upon it when the act is to be amended in the future, and we can be guided by it as we go forward. Now, Madam Speaker, I think that the Office of the Ombudsman serves a great purpose, but even though it's appointed by including the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, the Prime Minister is the only one who has the sole authority to call for the removal of an ombudsman. And while there are all of these investigative authorities, it is the Attorney General, in this case, the Senator, Honorable Senator Ryan Pinder, who has the ability to steer investigations away from certain things that he does not, as Attorney General, think should be investigated. Generally, matters of national security, but we've seen basic contracts, Madam Speaker, that have already, by this administration, been termed to be of a confidential, non-disclosure nature, so they can't disclose any of the facts. So while the office is going to be good, I don't think it's going to be that effective on this current administration, Madam Speaker. And I think that if you're ever going to be creating a body that's going to investigate, especially when complaints can come from persons incarcerated in prison, there is going to be a huge demand on this office, rendering it essentially incompetent unless it's staffed properly. And from what I've seen of important departments like the Department of Physical Planning, where they're responsible for overseeing so many construction projects but have a limited amount of vehicles, a limited amount of manpower in the office, this office is going to be ineffective for the first few years at least, possibly even longer than that. But it's a start, and it has my support, Madam Speaker. I'm thankful for the time that you've given me and to my colleagues who have fasted a little longer than they generally would have. I'm here to work with you all and work with my leader, Michael C. Pintard, members of the opposition, in this murder rise in serious crimes and generally crimes overall down in this great Commonwealth, Madam Speaker. It's a job that and a matter now before my position that I take very seriously. I put my support behind the Minister of National Security, my former boss. I'm a bit conflicted from saying too much when he's the source of the information that begins, and also to the Prime Minister. But everybody's back in town now. Let's make sure that we don't set a new record in January. The current murder record in a single month is 22 murders. I know that is something that people are looking at saying, well, 18 or 17 is not that bad. The worst has been 22. Those aren't the world records we're looking to pass, Madam Speaker. Let's make sure we don't get close to 22. Let's make sure that we keep those men, those women, those children, those grandmothers alive for the remainder of this month and for the remainder of the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Asmini? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker, my MP went a bit over the luncheon break, but we are actually at the luncheon break where most of us in government have to go and do other, attend to other appointments.
Yes.
I just, so you only been from your food either.
On the lunch break. After lunch? Is there a seconder? Thank you, honourable members. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House be suspended until 3 p.m. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is agreed. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m.